Hey everybody, I'm Rob Nelson, and this is Rob Nelson Live. It's Juneteenth. Now, before you say anything, most of you don't know or didn't know before the past week what Juneteenth was. Don't pretend you did. You didn't. Although many states, I think like 35, actually have days recognizing it. If you ask most people, especially most white people, they'd have no idea what Juneteenth was. Juneteenth was the day that a Union general rode into Galveston, Texas in 1865 and said there was no more slavery. In the mid-1920s, in Greenwald, Oklahoma, Greenwald is a suburb of Tulsa, there was a massacre of what was called Black Wall Street, one of the most affluent, prosperous, and up-and-coming Black communities in America. White people rode in, killed 300 people, left 10,000 homeless. It's taken almost a century to recover. We're in the middle of one of the most upheaval times in our country. Civil unrest, cultural unrest, racial unrest, and hopefully progress. 5 years ago, 2 days ago, was the day that Mother Emanuel Church had a worshiper come in, listen to people praying and worshiping, and then killed all kinds of Black parishioners. Turbulent times also lead to opportunities for change. I've got two great guests on today. We're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it. I want your feedback, your input. It doesn't matter if you knew what Juneteenth was. It doesn't matter what you did or didn't know. What matters is what you're going to do today going forward. And are we going to actually make change, or is this going to be another bleep on the cultural map that we forget about in 6 months? I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there. My name's Rob Nelson. I used to have a talk show on Fox, a show on Fox News, but news in America is so produced. I don't care if you think it's left, right, center, fake.
You passed tougher legislation to deal with the paparazzi after what happened with you and your family.
I think it's very important that we focus on rebuilding.
All right, welcome back. It's Rob Nelson, and this is Rob Nelson Live. And we've got a really exciting and powerful show today. I've got two amazing guests. My first guest is the founder of the LA Black LBGTQ movement and was the leader of the biggest protest march we saw in Hollywood, which happened last week. Nearly 10,000 people. So everybody, Paul Scott's going to join me now, and I'm really excited about it. Paul, thanks for being here.
Yeah, right.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I met you, just so people know, I met you at the rally. I walked up to you and I saw you. You were clearly like the guy who looked like the guy in charge. And I was early enough that there weren't 10,000 people there yet. And everybody, I was just taken by Paul's sort of presence and his, and Paul said it to me, and I'll let him say it himself, but he's a guy who didn't like, there's a lot of people out there want to be leaders, want to take charge, want to be in control. Paul's the guy who actually was like, you know what? I don't really want to be in the spotlight, but people called him to it and he stepped up. And to me, that's the most amazing kind of leader there is. So Paul, thanks for being here.
Guys, check this out. I'm in this big fucking crowd and I get this white boy running up to me with a fucking camera. I have no idea what he wants. I think it's a setup. And then I see the introduction of this. So forgive me if I'm a little emotional. I didn't expect this. Most times when white people want to talk to us, it's about some bullshit, Yeah. Fuck you, man. It's about some dumb shit. It's about drugs, or it's about poverty, or it's about, it's about crime, or it's about shit. A moment of time to get introduced, like that introduction with history, that some of it I knew, but surely was never talked about the way it's being talked about now.
Mm-hmm.
Brings this shit here, right? So, yeah, this is new. We're in new uncharted grounds, and you know, I don't take this lightly. I don't sort of numb by the sincerityness that I see happening from others. I mean, I'm from a generation where we just didn't talk about race, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You just sort of got over it and you just did the best you could, let alone sexuality and race. You know, I'm a veteran and college grad, you know. You just don't talk about those things, you just move on. So here we're at a new generation where, you know, we get a chance to be focused. You know, the universe puts all these things together. We, as a people, get a chance to be focused on long past overdue justice, or the process of justice, because we're long from there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great way to frame it, Paul, because we are, you know, everybody gets caught up in what happened, both good and bad. And my worry is always that these protests, these rallies, people's attention spans are short-lived. Even, look, we practically canceled coronavirus when the protests started. And by canceled, I mean the media sort of forgets about it. And I worry that people forget or they take simplistic actions. But at the end of the day, I think, have started a conversation that's not going to end. You said we never talked about it. And I think even more recently, most people still really don't talk about it. I'll be honest, white people are scared to talk about race, Paul. They are. Most people are afraid to say anything about it, you know?
I was the first black president of an all-white fraternity in college. My brothers, Pi Kappa Alpha, are my bros. And I don't know if, you know, in San Jose, race was a part of it. I was in the military. There were times, I'm sure, where now hindsight being 2020, when things probably happened to me that probably shouldn't have. But we certainly weren't allowed to mention it.
Mm-hmm.
So
you mean by that things that happened, meaning incidents that happened?
Oh yeah, you know, being carded way too many times, being called to give piss tests because they smelt marijuana, you know, and they, you know,
right,
those kinds of things that, you know, I'm not sure if everyone was being succumbed to. But you know, I went through that, and I look back at it, you know, having them still wearing in their uniform in South Carolina, being allowed to wear cowboy boots. You know,
I think we have a place. We're at a place right now where, you know, a lot of people will say, well, you know, why do we, nobody's saying right now we shouldn't focus on race, but where people are like, look, we're all Americans. Why can't we look past it and all be one? And to which I feel like, I think there's a goal to be one, to be unified as a nation. But your point about things that happened to you, you know, and you're from South Carolina.
Listen. I am a 6'5" black man first to everybody's eyes.
Right.
Not at what's in here, what's out here.
Yep.
That's what they see first when I walk in the room and when I leave the room. I can't change that.
Yep.
I can't change what they think about me. I can't.
Right. Yep. And that's why I think
what's so important is we black people aren't driving that message. We don't own the media. We don't own porn. We don't own, you know, the selective, you know, false media. So most of the mindsets or most of the paradigms about people who look like me has been directed by someone who doesn't look like me, by others. And so it's not our fault that a huge perception out there is about us. A lot of white people don't have any black friends.
Right.
You know?
I think
so
also
you need to see them as other.
Right. And I think, you know, to your point, I've said this before, I've coached people, and in my coaching, I will often ask people what they see. You know, I'll have take a black guy and have him stand up and ask people, what do they see when they look at this person? And they say everything but a black guy. They come up with 100 ways around it. And then I say to the black guy, I'm like, the first thing people see is you're a big black guy. And he goes, yup. And everybody, white people, cringe. And I'm like, what is, you know, like, what do you think? Like, what we're in this weird denial. It's like, it is what you see. It's why people cross the street, you know, who think they're not racist. And I think we have to talk about race in an open way to ever get past that.
You know, and some of these police involvement, there's an element of fear for your life that comes with a black man, because we know that cop is scared of me.
Mm-hmm.
We know he don't like me.
Mm-hmm.
We know ultimately he's afraid of me. So who's bringing that energy to that interaction unavoidably? They automatically are scared of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, these narratives, I can't shift. We don't have the audience to shift it. But let's keep it positive. We're at All Black Lives Matter, and we're having the conversation. And I openly and encourage anyone who is white to have the conversation. We can all agree to disagree.
And Paul, I think a lot of people are afraid to have the conversation. And, you know, and in a minute, we'll get in. One of our Reddit users just said, what about wealth inequality, brother? And I want to talk about wealth inequality. But before what's that?
What's wealth?
Well, I think what he means by that is, you know, I've said for a long time, we have a race problem. We also have a wealth and class problem.
Reparations.
But I'm saying the truth is there's a disproportionate number of Black Americans who are in poverty, percentage-wise, as a percentage to the population who are Black.
Rob, I possess my dad's report cards, my father's report cards, and they say Paul Scott on them. And they say Washington County School, colored schools, school for colored people. My father's report cards, not my grandfather's.
Right.
My great-grandfather's. My father's report cards. My father and my mother went to segregated high schools. The idea that you can come from negative 100 to positive 100 in one generation, this generation, which happened, and despite all the stuff that's thrown at us, is significant. So,
are you saying? Let me interrupt you, Paul. Are you saying
the falsehood to think that a correction of that huge injustice can be made in just one lifetime? The great thing is the newer generation, the 30-year-olds, the 20-year-olds, who are now not tied to that baggage, and it's the collective of that,
mm-hmm.
and the excitement of that's got us old people amazed, and has us old Black folks just like, okay, girls, go ahead, change Aunt Jemima. Okay, you're right. You know, we didn't think about that, but you're doing that now. Right on for you. Okay, you want to do protests on Hollywood Boulevard? We would have thought about that. Okay, this younger generation, you're 35 below, you guys, you white and brown and yellow who own it or are owning this. It's about you all now.
So I want to show the clip of you when I first met you. When the white guy came up to you at the rally. Like I said, Paul looked like he was sort of in charge. He just had this presence about him. And I sort of hovered in and this is when I met you and we'll talk about that.
Seeing this too.
What's that?
This is my first time seeing this too, right?
Yes, it is. Yes. Paul has not seen this clip before. Nobody but me has.
My name is Paul Scott.
Paul Scott, nice to see you guys. You know what's nice about this today right now? There's a sense of joy around it. You know, like I'll say, like you can protest angry, you can protest happy.
Well, I always often say the difference between what's happening here in the White House when they painted the street, the difference between here in D.C. that this was painted out of love. This was painted by both bunch of folk who actually give a fuck, give a damn, versus in D.C. it's the complete opposite. So this is an effort out of people who really care. I think today everybody's Black, and I think this is a great opportunity.
Everybody's
Black.
I mean, no, I'm not, but I'm saying in a way.
You only gay if you're lucky. You only gay if you're lucky.
Listen, people have been trying to flip me my whole life. So, you know.
Unfortunately, in this country, you have to have some sort of resistance, significant resistance, to make a change. I mean, this country sort of started on violence.
Right.
And so it's sort of part of the fabric of this country. We wouldn't have where we are today if it weren't for the advent of cell phones. We black people have been having this message for 400 years, back in Emmett Till's days. And the only real difference now, you all are seeing it on your television.
So, you know, but Paul, what I want to say to everybody is one of the things I loved was I covered a lot of these rallies, and this rally, everybody, was the biggest rally we've seen in Los Angeles. It was about 10,000 people. There were almost no police presence. It was incredibly peaceful, but and I'm not saying that people weren't worked up. I have videos of people, you know, chanting with a passion you can't believe, but it didn't feel angry in the way some rallies felt. It felt hopeful and positive, like we're going to make change.
Well, let me share something. What brought that about was initially, you know, an organization called Christopher Street West, which traditionally does gay pride in West Hollywood, had it brought to their board the idea of doing a Black Lives Matter march. And the board just sort of decided to vote on it and ran with it. And the first thing they did was get a police permit. And then black community got wind of that and had a Zoom meeting and realized, wait, y'all can't do a Black Lives Matter march. Y'all are fucked up. Y'all got issues. You know, y'all are horrible to us black people. You're Christopher Street West, white gay pride. Get the fuck out of here, you know? And recognize that. And the last thing you want, there are cops. Right. Cops. We don't need cops. We're not the violent people you think that we are. And that was a prerequisite. No cops. We didn't need them. You know, they didn't get any overtime for policing someone that they don't need to police.
And, you know, and I think that's been part of the divide around these protests is the tension, the violence, when there's looting, all that stuff. And you refer to the fact that our country founded on violence. And I think that's true. And I also think that's something that there are ways to not be violent and make change, but sometimes violence does lead to change. And I'm not advocating violence. I'm saying sometimes that's I don't think the looting is necessary, but I think people have to pay attention. But how do you respond to that outside of the
look at the KKK. Look at what they rained on my people for hundreds of years. Now y'all want to talk about nonviolence? Get the fuck out of here. Look at what the LAPD did with Rodney King and continues to do now. And y'all want to talk about nonviolence? Oh, fuck out. We get violent. We get violated constantly. You know, it's the reality. We black people are a lot more peaceful than you would ever think if we're just given a chance to be. We just get their fucking knee off our necks.
How do we do that, Paul? When we look at, you know, people have talked like, look at Atlanta, you know, where we've had, you know, and again, I said the other day on my stream, my Wednesday show, I was shocked that cop, if just for no other reason than self-interest. Why would you shoot a black guy who's unarmed?
We're scared. Y'all are fucking scared of us. Fear. Well,
I think you're right.
I'm running away from you. You're still scared of me.
I think you're right. But Atlanta has a black mayor, a black DA, and I think the police force is about 65% black. So clearly, it's not just that's a big percentage of a police force, and Atlanta's a very black city, but you're still seeing this there. So when we look at really going forward, like constructively, how do we get through this? There's how do we communicate through this, and there's how do we make systemic or structural reforms and changes?
Well, we have professionals in charge of shit who should know how to do that. We should elect people who know how to do that. And I'm a layman I'm quarterbacking here. I don't want to be a cop out at all. But clearly it can be done through some ways of legislation. We're now being seen by the arrest of these officers. You just can't go do a Trayvon Martin anymore.
Right.
You just can't do that. Just for some fucking Skittles. So I think it's beginning there. And again, there's a population that's on its way out of here. That fear population of black people. And they're getting older and they're fucking getting out of here. And their kids and their grandkids are not going to be imbued with those same ridiculous, racist, small ideas.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true.
And they're our hope and they're our future. And just wait and see. I mean, we're seeing such shifts. Get this guy out the house. Vote more. And we're seeing a shift in front of us. And I think everyone should really, they give yourselves a pat on the back. Yeah, you're sort of forced to focus on an issue for a while, but I think America. I have a lot of confidence in this country, and Black people have always been known to give America, its consciousness, and something that I guess is that I'm hearing from others as a effect of what we're doing with Black Lives Movement. I'm hearing other races recognizing their value, recognize that their race matters as well. I'm hearing Filipinos saying my race matters, and I'm hearing Mexicans be more proud of being Mexican, and I'm hearing others galvanizing around, yes, Black lives, but also mine too. And that is what Black people have always traditionally brought to this country, have always brought the civil rights to this country, have always brought rock and roll to this country, have always brought gospel to this country. Right. Every tree in the South and paved every road in the South, built that White House for fucking free. And his ancestors got nothing but more crime, more drugs, that we can't fly a plane, we don't drive a boat, and we've been inundated by somebody else's stuff for hundreds of years, and it continues today.
And I think, part of the conversation is about what you're talking about, sort of the change is uncomfortable for people. There's no question. But I think there are a lot of white people out there who feel like, well, so what you're saying is, I get tired, Paul, of the sort of the white person claiming white privilege, saying they're sorry, apologizing, claiming they need to be re-educated, putting a black square on their Instagram, when in reality, very few of those people are going to make the sacrifices or changes. Very few will make changes, and those that have will do it sort of for political reasons. The NFL, Roger Goodell will say, we were sorry, we're racist. Reebok, a company, will say, we're sorry. But in reality, they won't structurally change what they do. They won't change who's in charge. They won't give up their job as a CEO for a black person to have that job. And I'm saying they should, but I'm saying you're looking at often token things, and a lot of white people get resistant and go, well, are you saying I have to just apologize? Does that matter? Do you care if people apologize? Or is it like, no, just let's make change and get on with it?
That's a long sentence there, Rob.
It was.
Let me try to remember some of that.
So the essence of it is, at the end of the day, can we get past where it's just everybody who's white should say, I'm sorry, and feel bad for themselves, to where we get, whether you say you're sorry or not, let's actually make change?
Rob, I don't think that we need to get past it at all. I think that we need to be in it. And then once we're in it, that's where we are. This country is a race-based country. Now we're in it. I don't think there's a path to this. I think now it's an embracing of it, and it's a new millennium. I think is an amalgamation. There's gonna be a new cause coming soon, and I think again it's the growth of America that you don't have to get past. You embrace it, and then there's a new part too.
Are you not cynical?
I don't look at this as a momentary thing that we need to that. Human nature is human nature. I may not like you because you're fat. I may not like you because, you're handicapped. We all have our frailties. That's human nature. There's some of that I have to excuse. But in large part, I hope it's important that we continue to hold the mass media to a higher level of consciousness, so that every video that people are seeing a black man with a big stack of bills, with a bunch of fat honeys on the back of a car. Again, we can only control so much of the message. In fact, I don't think very little of the message we control now. And so, the American media has been imbued with sensationalism. It has been imbued with, cops, and again, what's happening now, man, I'm stepping back as a 57-year-old man who watched fucking every episode of Cops and loved it. Then I was like, oh, you know what? Thank you. You're right. Stop fucking glamorizing that shit because it's not that easy, you know? So again, there's another mindset beyond this fucking small brain that's happening now. And I'm excited about it. And it's like, fuck yeah, let's get rid of the syrup, the pancakes. Let's get rid of the fucking monuments. Let's get rid of the pictures. All that shit fucked up.
But what, and I want to get to, we have a Reddit question up, which I'll bring up in a second. It's on the screen. But what does it accomplish? This is where I'm saying, look, there's hate on both sides, right? I mean, there, you know, I saw, you know, hold on,
hate white people. We never have.
No. That's wait. There's plenty of black people who don't like white people, and you see that out there, and you experience it. I mean, that's fine. People are tribal.
But in general, black people, if you know a black person, he's gonna put your arms around you much more readily than a white person will.
Okay. And I'm not saying you're wrong about that. I'm just saying I think
we don't have no hate. We don't know it's not back and forth. Hell fucking no. We don't hate you. We don't put you in slaves. Fuck no. No.
There is. Wait. But you do not acknowledge there's a fair amount.
Animosity. We deserve to have some animosity to you all people.
Okay, well that's a fair response, but I'm saying I've worked in inner city communities and I've seen that can be what's that?
We don't hate you. Maybe that's a fear that you have. You know, suffering from your past ancestors that we want to hate you. Nah, we don't hate white people. We don't.
Well, there's video like I saw this video on Reddit the other day. And again, I hate when one video becomes the thing, but it's a guy running in a grocery store and he just beats down this old white guy who's just standing.
So I like that amongst the millions of us.
No. I know. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't like what
There's this video of that. There's this video of that.
No. But I don't think
you personally have you experienced hate?
I don't think all
you
white
personally, Rob, have you experienced hate from a black person?
Okay, yes and no. I worked in a lot of inner city communities and I was a big brother and things, and I experienced mostly love from the black community I worked in. However, a lot of the older kids in that community, the young 20-somethings, this is about 15 years ago, the other black kids would tell me, you know, they distrust you or don't like you because you're white. So I'm not going to say I personally have had hatred aimed at me. I think I kind of stepped past race in that way and try to just communicate with people. But I do know people who've said to me, you know, I hate white people. I know people who said I hate white people, maybe for justifiable reasons, but said I don't like white people.
Rob, wonderful that you were in that community. Did you get bombed while you were leaving? Did they follow you home?
No, listen, I know I came in at a place of power. That was part of the joke was kids were like, they weren't.
The fact that you came at all. The fact that you came and went and you were able to be there.
Hey, I agree. Listen, I am not.
Hate. You've made I am not saying it to suggest that I experience hate. I'm suggesting with the question on the screen was, how do we deal with hate from all sides? And I do think it can't, you know, at some level, there's a tension in race that creates a hatred. You're not nearly there when you're addressing the fucking hate that you put on us for 400 years. But now we need to go to all sides. That's evading the issue. So that's what I wanted to get to, because I think that's a valid perspective you're bringing up. But I'm bringing up the person who goes, well, wait, if it's on both sides, and your response is, you know what? Don't turn it to like what we're doing to you. Focus on what you did to us for so long. Let's redress that. We continue to do, you know, and again, relook at that. How in the hell can you say we hate you when few white people even got a white friend to be hated by? You don't have us in your job. You don't see us. How the fuck we hate you? That's your internal fear. That's what makes you shoot us in the back when we run out of the car. And that's why I'm pushing the point, Paul, because whether I think it or not, you asked do I personally, I know a lot of white people who think there's hatred toward them from black people. That's why I'm pushing the point. That's your fear. It's a great way to frame it. Got a question from a guy. Jimmy Sock says, does your guest support the removal of all cops from their communities? You know, it's a novel idea. Again, these younger generations support a lot more shit than my old ass would have ever thought about. But wouldn't that be just chaos? Yeah. You know, you're going to tell me you want to say no. You know, I'm a veteran and I own my home here. But you want to get rid of them motherfuckers? I don't need them. I mean, there's some sick shit. breeders got a lot of fucked up kids in foster homes that turn out to be horrible adults. All right. So yeah, we got to, we have law and order. That's important. Do we relook at law enforcement? Do we really fundamentally, like, I didn't need them for that parade. I didn't fucking need to take out a permit. I didn't need to spend a dime in overtime. Not 1%.
Yeah, no, and I will say again.
If we look at how we deploy them, if we need them at all, can they be renamed? Can we go into the 22nd century with something new beyond what we've been living with for how many hundreds of years that hasn't worked out?
I think there is an institutional problem in policing. And my point about Atlanta was when you have a police force that's 65% black, you can't say it's just racism. I think there is an authoritarianism in police forces. And your point about fear of black people builds into that, but that they have guns, they have badges, and they often abuse that power with everyone. I've had police abuse their power with me, and I'm a white guy, so I feel like maybe part of the answer is we reduce the number of police officers that can carry weapons. Like only a select number are trained to carry weapons. Maybe more police people get to have guns.
I think there are solutions for some smart people above my pay grade. And I'm really just excited that they're talking about it. I'm not going to, for my layman's cheer, say no to anything because I've been thinking that, oh, this is how it is, and therefore that's how it should be. Change is uncomfortable. But the idea that you and I are having this meeting virtually is change, and old people don't like change, We go kicking and screaming into change. And change is in the air, change is in the wind, and change is exciting. The opening of this dialogue, you pursuing a story beyond sensationalism is change, and it should be all congratulated. In the spirit of America, let's not look at the riots of it. You guys, America, if I can say anything to you, I'm more proud of you than I've ever been, I'm more proud of you now because I'm proud of you. I get to see little white girls that would normally be totally afraid of me with a sign saying, I matter.
Mm-hmm.
You know how it hits me right here? So, America always does its dance, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Right.
We got to burn some shit down to build some shit up. This time we didn't burn this shit down in our hood. We burnt that shit down in your hood. And
that I'm laughing, but there's a truth in that because it always struck me as odd when you'd see race riots and people are tearing down their own neighborhood.
We didn't have no choice before. We just sort of showed up on the corner. Now, hey, it's over here now.
To your point about the next generation, I actually talked to a couple during that rally. They were obviously a black couple, and they were married, but they had kids from before. And they talked about how he said how his daughter, when she was in school, she was in a mostly white school, and they had a party. One parent said she couldn't come because she was black. And then literally, this wasn't making it up. And they had a parent-teacher thing about the whole thing. The end of the story was that daughter and that white girl today, 10 years later, are best friends, which I think shows you the difference between generations.
Well, it's okay to say my best friend's a white person.
No.
And you white people, it's okay to say, hey, my best friend's a black person. It's okay.
It's what?
It's okay for you white people to say, hey, my best friend's a black person. But it's okay.
Yeah, well, it is okay. I'm saying the point of the story is that they became friends despite the mother's thing, and I think that's a generational change.
I think any real Americans, we've got a lot of foreigners here in this country that may not have had interaction. Again, their viewpoints are driven by small, very small segments of people who look like me, not me, but people who are similar in appearance only. So again, they already see the outside. People who are similar in appearance, they see cops, they see the sensationalism. So it's really easy, for the average person to, imbue that same mindset when they finally see me in person, even unconsciously.
So let me bring this, Paul, as we're nearing the end of our time, and you're great, and I could love to have you talk more with me. I want to come back to where I started, which is, again, I don't think most people know what Juneteenth was. And it's sort of stunning that, you know, that even the number of states that have a day proclamation for it, but also that most people don't realize the significance of things like what happened in Greenwood, you know, and sort of like to realize the effect wasn't just slavery, it's what happened since. And there have been consequences that we, you know, 100 years later, they're still trying to rebuild Greenwald. And, you know, like, it's like, you know, you tear things down, it's hard to rebuild them. You said it doesn't happen in a generation. When we look at changes that are trying to be made, I see someone like, he's a Republican, Tim Scott, who, you know, and for those of you who know, he was on the Senate floor, and one of the Democrats, and this is what I hate about the partisanship, called the bill they were doing a token bill. And he broke down in tears, remembering back 5 years ago, because he's from South Carolina, to the church shooting, the Mother Emanuel church shooting. And he said, you know, I'm sick of the politics of this. He's like, this bill has anti-lynching in it. It has, you know, it has body cams. It has escalation training. Like, we need these things. We have to take steps. We can't just sit on our political, you know, things and, you know, use tokenism or race baiting tokenism or political divide. How do you look at that as a black guy? And you're also a gay black guy. You're used to sort of walking divides. We do have to step beyond the left-right politics of this, right? If we have to kind of take progress where it's at, just because you're a Republican, you know, you can be a black Republican senator and fight for black rights and black causes. Just because you're a Republican doesn't exclude you.
Well, I'm actually an independent. So I'm a gay independent because I don't think it fair for me not to think that some label or Republican or conservative ideals I can't appreciate if I choose to be a party that has held us in this ranks forever. That being said, Barack Obama, I do.
You want Barack Obama for 4 more years?
Huh?
You want Barack Obama for 4 more years?
Obama forever.
He didn't do that much for the black community.
Then I want one of those daughters to step in. We haven't even seen or heard from them. Not one iota, even word. You know. So, but that being said, politics aside, I don't think the world is all politics, and I think we get lost in a political message. And I vote, but my friends vote one side or the other, and I respect and love my friends. I got some guys that post some of my best friends that post some shit on their Facebook. I'm like, you serious? But don't mean I don't love them. Don't mean they don't love Paul. So
Paul, let me take you real quick as we're wrapping up. I want to show this clip. This gets into the issue of sort of, because again, I think, you know, when you're black, it's one thing. When you're black and gay or black and transgender, it adds a whole nother level. And I think it shows sort of the steps we have to take to be inclusive and comfortable, and that we are making progress, but have a ways to go. So take a quick look at this, this trans woman I walked up to, and then we'll talk for a second before we wrap it up.
Sure.
What's with the 2 different colored shoes?
It's just a thing that I do.
Okay, so are you trans?
Sure.
No, I don't know. I'm asking because you have a deeper voice.
You can call me he, she.
So someone said she. You'll be all right. Yep. Someone said he. Which do you get mostly? She.
She. Yeah.
What do you self-identify as?
I always say queen. I always say she. So
what were you born as?
A male.
Talk about that. You're black and trans. So it's a double.
Yes, it's hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm not accepted in the black community. I am black, but I feel like sometimes they don't claim me. And then sometimes in the gay world, I feel like I'm not accepted too because I'm like both.
Because you're black.
Yeah.
I've heard people say in the black community being gay, or trans or whatever.
Yep.
But in the gay community, there's a whiteness stereotype.
Yeah. That's a sad reality.
Are we making progress?
Yes, we are.
As a trans black
Yes.
woman, man, whichever you want, you feel hopeful?
Yes.
I love it. You have a great face. This is a face of hope right there.
So, you know, her energy was so great. And I just thought she kind of encapsulated, and I talked to other people who brought it up too, gay men who said it, but there is sort of that thing. You walk a divide in the black community, right? Because there's still an acceptance issue there for gay, as there is in the white community too, but not the same, right? So you're kind of in both worlds. And it's really all about us not having full acceptance.
Yeah, well, let me say something first. Because you said bitch's skin was flawless. That bitch's face was.
She had a beautiful face.
No makeup or none. That bitch was beat. Anyway, I saw a woman in transition. You know, sexuality is hard to discuss. You know, it's funny that you should say that because I was just talking to a dear friend of mine who's in jail now for some horrendous crime that he committed, and he's telling me how in jail he's not wanted by the trade because he's too butch, and that they only like the femmes, they only like the trans. So it's a real conundrum in the Black community. I do believe there's a discussion that's not had. It's hush, hush, sweet Charlotte. We just don't talk about it. You know, the dates and the people that are attracted to transgender women would never fuck with a man like me. And although I'd probably be attracted to them, it wouldn't be reciprocal. And, you know, there's a story to be told there. There's a normalization. Hopefully we can allow for sexuality to be sexuality, no matter what you like. You know, you like a chick with a dick, or you like a prick with a chick, you know, whatever you like, whatever.
Did you just make that one up? The last part there. So, all right. So as we close this up, Paul, what I want to know is, how do you think, and I know you keep going above your pay grade thing, but let's be honest, the pay grade of the people we pay to be in office, generally, we should remove them and put people like you in office. I've always said that. Real people who didn't want to be like in charge, who just felt called. But both in the gay world, you talk about it, in the issue you just mentioned, and in the race world. How do we start having the conversation when where we started this, so many white people are honestly afraid? They'd be afraid to have the conversation I'm having with you. They'd be afraid to ask that trans woman if she's trans.
Rob,
What's
every
that?
white person out there, let's give ourselves some credit. Give you white people a credit. I believe there's some real good intended white folks who got this energy, who want to jump on board and create change, like yourself.
Yeah.
So I would say to them, don't get rid of your fear. Go out and find an organization that you can lend your skill set to. Help us build our capacity. Help us build our websites. Help us lend your skill sets to a Black organization that's struggling. Cave into your desires of being a part of this movement. Be part of it. We're at a moment of time when it's your moment of time. Get past your fears, and as we just try in this short, brief time, try to dispel that the haters on both sides. It's not, we love you. We always have. And we always welcome anyone. Rob, wasn't I like, what's up, Rob? Always. We always are. We're welcoming with open arms like they did at that church.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think also people just need to feel comfortable to start having the conversation. That don't you can
have a conversation. Go do something. Get out. Okay, doing something. Yes.
But by conversation, I mean people are so afraid to say anything about it that it's sort of a white liberalism that gets in the way. You're not intentionally being racist.
Things. You're not going to learn by spouting off your small point of views. You're already setting them. Go out and go interact. Go out and do something like you're doing, Rob.
All right.
Spouting off your beliefs from one side to the other doesn't create change. You already believe what you believe. I already believe what I believe. When you get out there and you shake hands and you get out there and try to make a change that's really within you, that's the growth that we all have an opportunity to have. It doesn't make sense. Don't keep posting more shit on Twitter or posting more shit on this social network. Get out there in the streets like you did, Mr. Rob Nelson, like you're doing, Rob Nelson, beyond the talk. Act. There's where your soul will be. There's where the change will be.
I like it. I love that. I love what you just said. I'm going to leave it there. Let's take action. Let's talk more action. I love it. Paul, thanks for coming on. I'd really love to have you continue this conversation as we go forward. Do it again. It was great talking to you. I'm glad I met you.
And thank you for your technical expertise, Mr. Rob Nelson.
What's that?
Thank you for your technical expertise.
That's another story for another day, right? It was great having you on. Thanks a lot, Paul. I really
appreciate you.
Talk to you soon. All right, everybody. That was just really great. And I just want to say before we shift to my next guest, who's Freeway Ricky Ross, I just want to say what Paul said about action and taking action is really powerful, and think about it. If you're doing the posting and the talking, it's easy to put up a slogan. And you know what? My thing, get over if you have issues about bringing stuff up, just bring it up, stop being afraid to do that, but take some action. You'd be surprised the difference it can make in the world around you. And I experienced it firsthand. So I know that's true. One of the times when I was, as I said, working in an inner city community, I befriended, I became like a little brother to me, a kid who was a really tough case. I mean, he really didn't, his first words were to me, "I hate white people." I mean, he was an amazing young man, but he was really challenged in the world he was in. And I ended up going to school with him. His father was out of the picture, and he took me to school as his big brother. And I'll never forget the day. I've said it before. When I walked down the hallway, and his friends, it was an all-black school in an inner city ghetto, and he said, "Who's this?" And he said, "It's my brother." And they're like, "Can't be your brother. He's white." And he's like, "That doesn't mean anything." The point is, we can get past. You don't have to look past color. Color's there, as Paul said. People see a big black guy when they look at him. You see a white guy when you look at me. But we can get to a point where we're actually making a difference, where we're stepping beyond those differences toward a unified kind of outcome. And we need unity. We need change. But change is going to come through working together. All right. My next guest, Freeway Ricky Ross, is himself a remarkable kind of cultural figure. If you don't know who he is, Freeway Ricky Ross kind of came to fame, well, at different times, but in the 80s, got his nickname because he was a drug dealer and he worked along the 110, the Freeway 110, the Harbor Freeway in Los Angeles. He sold a lot of cocaine. He sold a lot of drugs. According to things I've seen, they estimate that he, in about a 7-year period, moved tons of cocaine, may have had almost $1 billion in revenue, which now would be probably a couple $1 billion in revenue. There's a sort of a apocryphal story, $3 million in one day. Ricky didn't read till he was 28. He learned to read at 28, and he got a life sentence for his drug dealing, which was commuted because he learned to read and he learned to found a loophole in the law and got himself out. Since he's gone on to become an activist, an author, he's had a Netflix docs made about him. He's just a kind of a fascinating person and sort of spanning this a generation of time through drugs and mass incarceration and the whole big picture. So I'm going to say no more about him other than, Ricky, thanks for being on Rob Nelson Live.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
Let me get you a little closer to the camera. Can you squeeze up a little bit? Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, is that good?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks. So that intro, I know, I always think about this, like, does somebody like you want to be remembered as a drug dealer? No, but it's at the same time, you were a big figure in that, and also part of the whole Iran-Contra and the contraband and the government moving drugs. So, I mean, that's sort of defined how you got to where you are.
Well, it's part of my history, so I can live with it.
Right?
Trying to deny my drug dealing would almost be like trying to deny my mom and my dad.
Right.
I couldn't do it. So they're here, they're there, and I have to live with it. And I'm perfectly fine with it. I have no problems about being introduced as a drug dealer or ex-drug dealer. It doesn't really matter.
Is it true that you...
That
Go
doesn't
ahead,
define who I am. That just defines a part in my life.
Is it a chapter you regret?
No,
I know regret's a tricky thing.
No regrets, only lessons.
Lessons.
I learned so much from it. Yeah, I mean, it blessed me to be the person that I am today. It's funny about life. When you look at it and you look back at it, people might say, "Well, wow," but I don't even regret my jail time because I learned so much from going to jail, and it was an experience that more people probably would want to experience. And that may sound crazy, but once you go through it and you've done it, you could say, you know what, I did that. And
you got a life sentence. You got a life sentence originally, right?
I did.
And you overturned it. Did you learn to read in prison?
I did.
You did in prison learn to read.
Yes.
Do you think if you had had a different education, a different upbringing, instead of moving into drugs, you would have become a very successful businessman in a mainstream industry? Because you made a lot of money as a drug dealer.
Yes, I could have, and that's my goal right now, to prove to the world that you can't judge a person all the time by um, what they've done in life, because you would have to know the whole circumstances. You know, people, you know, they try now to. I'm looking for the correct word that I'm trying to come up with, but it's like they try to judge me, and I say that you can't judge me until you know me. You know, if you don't know me, then there's no way that you could judge me. So I feel that I mean, I feel not right now that I could do anything, you know. But I read over 300 books before I left prison, and that's not counting law books. That's business books, because one of the things that I had thought about when I was in prison is that I'd never filled out a job application, um, and I didn't know what I was going to do when I got home. You know, I knew that I couldn't go back to selling drugs, which was something that I absolutely love to do. Um, and I had to find something else to do with myself, because it had got to the point where it wasn't about the money no more. It was more about the thrill, the sensation of dealing drugs, you know, getting away with it.
Interesting. So I was going to ask you what was about it, and that's what it was. It was the thrill.
Yeah, you fall in love with it. I mean, you almost become as bad as, and you know, it's funny, and I tell people, the drug users taught me how to sell drugs. As crazy as that might sound, it's kind of like we're kind of like using each other, you know, which in my world is perfectly fine. It's okay to use people. You just don't want to misuse them.
Do you feel, though, at some level that you contributed to, obviously I want to talk about the whole mass incarceration thing and all that, that you contributed to hurting, ruining a lot of, black people's lives who became drug addicts because and I know someone
Absolutely.
else could have sold it, but you were the one selling it. I'm not saying that pejoratively. I'm asking how you actually think about it.
Oh no, I do. I definitely played a part in it. But then, you know, like I said before, the drug addicts actually played a part in destroying my life as well.
How so?
Well, when they buy drugs, it creates a drug dealer like myself. It makes me want to sell drugs because they're going to spend money to get it, and I want that money.
And so when you look back at the drug dealing chapter and then the prison chapter after that, when you look at the drug dealing chapter, what do you said you don't have regrets, lessons, but obviously you can't be happy that well, maybe you can be. I don't know. You made a lot of money. I don't know. I guess the government took that money away, but you can't be happy at if you help destroy lives, especially now that you're trying to sort of help rebuild those lives.
Well, you're not happy about. I mean, with any business almost that we go into now. I mean, if you look at the car dealers, do you think that they feel sorry for the people who have wrecks in their cars and get killed, or uh, the people who are building high rises when somebody gets hurt, get killed doing it? They look at it as if it's a casualty of the business. Um, and it's almost the same way we do when we're selling drugs. We look at it as if that's part of this business. It's part of this life that we all volunteer to participate in. No drug dealer. I've never put a gun on anybody's to anybody's head and told them to smoke drugs. Uh, Most of the people that I sold drugs to were already using drugs when I got started, and like I
What
said, they taught me the business. I was a novice when I first started selling cocaine.
the last question on this, what happened to all the money?
You know, money comes and goes. You know, my mom
Yeah,
used
but
to
you
say,
made millions and millions.
well, you know, my mom used to say, a fool and his money will soon depart. So at the end of the day, I was a fool. I really didn't understand money. You know, money doesn't come with instructions. Um,
So you burned
and
through it.
Not necessarily burned through it like most people. You know, I wasn't fascinated with the cars, the jewelry, and the clothes. My thing was to try to buy my way out of the drug business. Me and the drug users, we almost had the same problem. You know,
So
they were trying to get higher, and I was trying to get out of the drug business.
you're like kind of Al Pacino in The Godfather. Like, I want to get out. I want a respectable thing out of my mob business.
Yes, absolutely.
When you look at, and Ricky, I told you to move closer, back up just a little. I didn't mean to get you quite so close. There, that's better. I want to, it's get that nice.
I thought you wanted to see my teeth.
Well, we could see them. It was great. You got great teeth, better than mine. When you look, let's talk a little about what's happening, and mass incarceration and police reform, police brutality, the protests. Well, let's start with mass incarceration. There is a disproportionate number of Black people in prisons, no question. Some people argue, well, it's because more Black people commit crimes. Now, that may or may not be true. There's also disproportionate sentencing. There's also, and there's sentencing issues and there's structural issues. But reality is we've put a whole generation, for 2 generations of Black men, particularly in prison, and that can't be a victory for anybody. It's like we all sink together. If one part of the ship goes down, we all go down.
Right. Well, most people don't really understand that. They don't understand that we're connected. And I thought with this virus that's going on right now that that would bring us as a nation closer together because we're so connected. But it looks like it done totally the opposite.
Yeah. How have you reacted to watching the protests and the change we've seen? Whether it's some of it, as I said earlier in the show, I think some of it's superficial and that people get, kind of jump on the bandwagon and then jump off. But we are also seeing real push for certain kinds of change. Even, again, I mentioned earlier, Tim Scott, the Republican senator, pushing a crime bill, a police reform bill that actually will really deal with some significant issues that would in a positive way affect Black Americans. So there is change coming from it. But when you look in at it from your life and your vantage point, are you like, woohoo, this is great? Or are you like, it's not going to change? Or what?
Well, I'm wondering how long will it last? And is it the kind of situation that will last the duration? I don't think so. I think that we're going to need even when I was in prison and I looked back out at the world and I was wondering what was it that I could bring to the table, and what I figured it would be economics is one of the things that we as Blacks need in this country, because without economics
we lost your audio, Ricky.
Did you lose me still?
Now you're back.
Yeah, without economics,
now you're gone. So, Ricky, if you could refresh your browser, Ricky, just put put that link in and you'll pop back up, and I'll fill in until you come back. So, one of the things that I think I want to get to with Ricky is what is it we are going to have to do to actually make real change? And on the surface, we've got certain things we've lined up. We know, people talk about systemic racism. Okay, systemic racism is hard to change. It doesn't change, as Paul Scott said earlier, you can't change things in a generation. You can start to try to make some systemic changes. You can trying to find some new solutions when it comes to policing. And again, you can go to the defund the police, which isn't going to solve anything. You're just going to have a lot more crime. I really believe that. But there are definite reforms that could be made. And culturally in police departments, 2 actual practical things that could change the nature of policing. But it gets more complicated when you talk about what do you have to do to rebuild a community, and particularly in the case of young Black men, who a disproportionate number of them have grown up in poverty and are essentially in situations where they're trapped and end up in prison. So I think we have Ricky back. Ricky, do we have you back?
I am.
Okay. So what I was saying is, and I don't know if you could hear me, but I'll just recap it. What I wanted to get to with you was, it's one thing to talk about making certain kinds of reforms to policing and that kind of thing. It's another thing when you talk about what is going to happen to rebuild, for a generation of Black men who disproportionately have grown up in poverty, disproportionately have been imprisoned. Those are deep, long-seated issues. How do we change that and create new opportunity for the next generation beyond the policing issue? The real, how do we create a more level playing field?
Well, what it is that we have to distribute the power. We have to distribute the power from economics, the schooling. All the power has to be distributed equally. Right.
But what
now,
does that mean? What does that mean? What do you mean? What does redistribute the power? What does that mean? Put new people in charge?
Well, share the power. Right now, Blacks have no power in this country. The ones who are picked by the big corporations, once they get money, they forget, what the struggle was.
Do you really think that's true? I mean,
oh, absolutely.
I'm to be devil's advocate. A lot of people would say, and I would even say, I don't think Blacks have the same power as white people overall, but there's an enormous number of Black people in real positions of power, leadership power in cities, states, former president. What's that?
Name one.
Well, I was even mentioning Atlanta. The police chief, the mayor of Atlanta, the DA in Atlanta are both Black. But
do they really have power? What can they do?
So do you feel like even in sports, do you feel like super athletes like LeBron James don't have power?
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't? No. Okay, so you see it as an institutional power, that having an individual who has enormous wealth or, Oprah-like wealth is not enough.
Those guys have people behind them that still tells them what they can say and what they can't say. They can only speak out when they're allowed to.
So how do you?
I have more power than they do.
Interesting. So
because I can say whatever I want to. I have no fear of going to prison.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. So there's nothing that nobody can put over my head other than killing me.
So you have a pretty radical view on this. When you're saying LeBron James doesn't really have power, someone else is telling him what to say, he might be like, no one's telling me what to say.
But I don't believe that, though. I don't believe it. I mean, he might say that, but I don't believe it. It's funny, but we have so many talented Blacks that are running around trying to get help. Just a couple weeks ago, I watched a video of this guy. He was an inventor, and he went to one of the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, and they had the guy threw out. The same people that he went to get money from had security guards to take him by the arm and throw him out the building. Mm-hmm. So what chance did he have of getting that money?
Right.
To fulfill his dreams.
Yeah, no, and I've heard lots of stories about, I get it. There's a certain institutional bias in a lot of places toward Black people, whether it's justified or not. U.S. Senator Tim Scott talking about being stopped in the Senate to prove he was a senator.
Why don't we have a job training facility in some Black community?
What? Say that again, Ricky.
Why don't we have some type of job training facility in one Black community somewhere in this country?
I didn't know we didn't, but isn't that part of what empowerment zones do, is create those training zones in those neighborhoods?
Who's creating them?
Well, who should create them?
Well, you said LeBron James has power.
So you're saying, why isn't he creating them?
If he had power, wouldn't that be what he was doing when I was building a theater to create jobs, to teach kids how to work on computers, to bring some of the top business people to the community to teach them how to do business? That's what I would call power.
But does that mean then that you're saying Black people who have created wealth often and power often aren't choosing to use it to do that? Or you're saying they couldn't if they wanted to?
I don't know which one it is.
Because it could be they're simply, and plenty of people are trying to give back, right? I guess for me, the question becomes, when you say redistribute power, Ricky, how would you actually do that? Are you saying like we have to have a revolution and just rip everything down, or
No,
because a lot of people are going to be like, no, we're not going to do that.
No. Revolution doesn't start with you don't have to do a revolution with wars and with riots and with marches. It has to become from the mind. Like me, see, I had a revolution of the mind. I went from being totally illiterate to being highly educated.
Mm-hmm.
Because what people kept telling me is that if you could mix the streets with the books, you would be unstoppable. So what I did is I wanted to try it. I wanted to see if what they were saying was true. And since I've done that, it has given me a whole new perspective on life. You know, when I see the people who and these people are not even elected by the community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, literally because you could catch a football or dribble a basketball or you could box, or you know, maybe you went to Stanford and you learned how to do a venture capitalist or something, and you got up under the right people and you made some money, but you never come back to the hood. You know, I don't call you the homeboy because you lived in the hood if you never come back.
So we've got a comment here, Ricky. I want to put up. It says that your guest spent his. I'm going to let you respond to it. Your guest spent his career destroying the black community. The cops are trying to, spend their careers trying to protect those in the inner cities. Your response, and feel free to respond however you want. Not that you wouldn't, but I'm saying, that person saying
we would say some cops spent their life trying to protect and serve, but there's a lot of them that don't. I got scars in my face where I got on my knees and put my hands on the top of my head, and as soon as I was handcuffed, they allowed the dog to attack me and beat me in the head with flashlights and billy clubs. 4 cops. They average about 6 feet tall, and me myself soaking wet. I was 150 pounds, 5'6.5", 5'7". So,
but if I can be the devil's advocate here for what Jimmy Stock here is saying, he's saying, but you spent a lot of time in doing what was destroying the black community. So you're pointing out there's a lot of bad cops. How do you respond to that part of it?
Well, you could say that I was destroying the black community, but then you also could say, well, maybe Rick was a scientist. Maybe he got into the black community. He got into the drug trade to see what it was all about so that he could fix it.
Okay. I don't know. You really believe that, though. You believe it led you to that. Same way you believe prison was part of your journey. Like you don't resent being in prison. You're like, or regret it. You're like, I learned from it.
Absolutely.
What did you learn from prison?
I learned how to read.
Beyond that, which is a big deal.
Well, I learned that prison wasn't fair. I understood that you could be innocent and still wind up in prison. That if you're a black man and you're going to trial, you're probably going to wind up with 12 white people in your jury. Your judge is probably going to be white. Your lawyer is probably going to be white. All the jailers are going to be white. And the clerks are going to be white. And you'll be the only black person in courtroom hoping that you can get a favorable decision.
Do you have a fundamental dislike or distrust of white people in general, or no?
Oh, no. I have a lot of white friends. And I love them like brothers. We've ate together. I've stayed at their house. They stay at my house. Matter of fact, one just come down today from Oregon, and one of the greatest people in the world. I don't know if I've met many black guys as good as this guy is.
I will say you have a very kind of Zen-like demeanor, Ricky. It does come through that you seem like a guy at peace. I have
absolutely no worries, no hate. I love everything.
No worries and no hate.
No worries and no hate. I believe that everybody is telling the truth until they show me differently.
So the comment on the screen is responding to the comment before, saying there's questioning no room for redemption, and refers to Saul in the Bible, spending years, kind of crucifying the Christians, working for the Roman Empire before becoming a different man working for good.
Well, you know what Jesus said. Huh?
I know a lot of things Jesus said. Jesus said, don't throw stones. Jesus said, love one another. Which one are you referring to?
He said, he who's never sinned, throw the first stone.
Right.
And everybody start running backwards.
I want to wrap this up, Ricky, with talking about how, and by the way, yes, a great point. And we all need to think twice about throwing stones. And I try to say that because, I think I spent a little time up in San Quentin working with some of the lifers on a video project. And one of the things I noticed was that there's a sense from people from outside that I could never be that person. I could never make those mistakes. I would never be friends with a person like that. And when you spend time there, you realize, hey, everybody makes mistakes. Some are really horrendous mistakes. You pay for those mistakes, but you need a second chance. And we don't tend to look at the world that way. But how do we, coming back to my initial thing, what are the kind of the core things we have to do? You said redistribute power. How do we actually start making progress from this moment, so we don't just, you said it's going to fade away. I think it will too. I think people start forgetting about what they were worked up.
I got rich in the drug business?
What's that?
You know how I got rich in the drug business?
I do not.
I wanted for my brother what I wanted for myself.
Okay.
Everything that I had, I wanted all of my brothers and all of my friends and everybody that I knew. I wanted them to share in the same thing that I was sharing in. See, at one time, we didn't know that cocaine was bad. Remember, at one time, it used to be writers in actors, they used to put cocaine in it. All of our stars sold cocaine. I mean, mention some of your biggest stars from the 60s. Quincy Jones, Don Canillas, Richard Pryor. All of those guys used cocaine. So when I heard they were using cocaine, I wanted a part of that too. I wanted to be like Richard Pryor. I wanted to be like Don Canillas. I wanted to be on TV. I wanted to be a big star.
So that's really interesting. How do you? I want to come back to one thing before I ask you my last question. I'm struggling with the no regrets. I'm a person who has regrets. How do you not have regrets about what you did as a drug dealer, knowing it cost a lot of people, hurt a lot of people's lives, even if you didn't mean to at the time? How does that not create a sense of regret? Like, I wish I could undo that harm.
Because you would be living in the past and I live in the future. See, I don't see well right now with my eyes, but I can visualize what the future is going to look like. And if you stay living in the past, then that's what it is. You'll stay in the past.
And what is that?
I'm looking toward the future.
And what does that future look like between race relations in your eyes?
Well, I believe, first of all, that we as Blacks have to lift ourselves up to a level that we've never been in this country before. And I believe that we can do it. We need somebody that can actually show us how to do that. And I think that I'm a perfect example of somebody that can come from being totally illiterate. And if I can come from being totally illiterate to probably being the richest person in this country, then I think that would give a lot of Black kids the motivation to stand up.
Can we do this together, or do Black people need to sort of take a Malcolm X approach and it's like, do it, don't count on white people to help? Wait, you're there, but I don't hear you. There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
We can definitely do this together, but we all have to be totally honest with ourselves, and we have to first forgive ourselves and know what we need forgiveness for. See, I understand that selling drugs was not a good thing. It wasn't something that I should have been doing. But at the same time, I have to forgive myself in order for me to move on. Otherwise, I'll sit around and beat myself up every day saying I destroyed lives and I destroyed the community and I got
Oops. We lost you again, Ricky. All right. I think his feed keeps popping out. Ricky, I want to thank you for being on the show. Sorry, we got the last bit of Ricky's comment cut off, but I'm going to pick up where I thought he was going, because I think, look, it's maybe we're getting him back real quick. If we get him back, I'll let him finish this out. Okay, you're back. I was going to wrap up the show, Ricky, but then you came back and then you're gone. It's like the coronavirus disconnect. All right. I'll just wrap it up from here. Ricky, appreciate you coming on the show. You know, we started this out with the idea that I mentioned Juneteenth. And, you know, I don't think we can afford to make, whether you knew about it or not, whether you know what it is, it's not the point. The point isn't whether you make it a holiday or don't make it a holiday. The point isn't whether you put a black square in your Instagram or not. The point isn't whether you sort of say, I'm sorry for everything I said or thought, re-educate me, or whether you marched in a protest. The point is whether or not, one, you can understand where someone else is coming from. If you're a white person, can you understand the shoes that black people have walked in or feel they still walk in, and not judge it? And the other side, if you're a black person, can you understand that a lot of well-intentioned white people feel they do think there's been injustices, but don't know how they either feel they're not responsible for it directly. And you can say, okay, but it doesn't matter. But no, they feel that way, or feel that they're trying, but feel like they like sort of can't win. Like, I can't say or do enough. Now, again, I'm not saying one side or another is right. I'm saying we have to start by seeing where everybody's coming from. And right now it's a moment where we're seeing where black people are coming from, which is why you need to stop saying all lives matter. We know all lives matter. Right now we're saying Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter too. Stop pretending they don't. We put a focus on that. Going forward, what are we going to actually do to make the changes? What are we actually going to do to have things have this not just be another moment of a cultural upheaval, or worse, a cultural divide that just keeps digging down and digging down and digging down with less progress? How do we get past a point where we have a Republican senator from South Carolina, you know, Tim Scott, standing up in tears on the Senate floor because his Democratic counterpart called the legislation that he's pushing, which would lead to de-escalation, anti-lynching, you know, reforms for policing, calling it token. And Tim Scott crying and saying, just because I'm a Republican doesn't change. I'm a black man. I've witnessed this. I've watched this. My heart breaks for the injustices. How do we get past a point where we've turned this into another partisan or cultural divide and use it as a chance to actually make progress? If you saw anything from this conversation today, it's that we can talk over race lines. We can communicate. We can even misunderstand each other. We can laugh about it. We can struggle about it. And we can feel shared pain and empathy about it. We can get choked up about it. We can get angry about it. And ultimately, we can do something about it. I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live.